And now, to tell us more about data-driven human rights storytelling, we want to invite Data4Change's director, Bronwen Robertson. Data4Change connects journalists, data scientists, designers, and technologists with human rights organizations to collaborate on data-driven projects that forge real change and have a lasting impact. Bronwen will provide us with tips to create powerful storytelling projects. Welcome, Bronwen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today and for the wonderful introduction. I've been following on the live stream and just jumped over into the backstage, and I'm really looking forward to giving this talk today. So I should also preface my talk with the caveat that I'm not a journalist, but today we've got an exclusive highlights reel from some of the top journalists in our network, giving you their top data journalism tips. So hopefully that will sort of answer some of the questions you might have. My name's Bronwen. I'm the Executive Director of Data4Change. My background is in research and advocacy, and in a past life, I wrote a book about underground rock music in Iran. Before we set up Data4Change, our co-founder and head of operations, Stina Bakker, worked as a journalist for the BBC, The Independent, and CNN. So it's pretty safe to say that storytelling has always been at the heart of what we do. And so today I'll show you just how important numbers and narratives are to our work. And then at the end, we'll finish up with the Q&A, but don't be shy. By now, I'm sure that our head of design, Michael Brenner, will have introduced himself to you in the chat on the YouTube live stream. So go ahead and ask some questions and engage with him on the side, and then we can check in with each other at the end. From our tiny but mighty headquarters in London, we support a global network of grassroots organizations, human rights defenders, data researchers, data scientists, journalists, storytellers, hackers, hacks, web developers, and designers that spans more than 90 countries. And since we first started in 2014, we've designed, developed, and launched more than 50 data-driven campaigns, projects, and stories aimed at changing how people think about and engage with some of the world's most important issues. And so we've built up our profile in the journalism, design, and tech communities by hosting immersive in-person co-creation sprints. And they're kind of like summer camps on steroids. And so far we've held sprints in the UK, Lebanon, Uganda, Jordan, Estonia, and Kenya. But of course, during the pandemic, like everyone else, we've had to shift our work online. And we've tried to keep the spirit of what we do alive and kicking in the meantime. And for each project that we work on, we start by curating a multidisciplinary team of individuals from all around the world, and then we match them up with organizations that are driving forward positive change, both in and for their communities. And together they co-create data-driven projects that forge change with lasting impact. And so those data-driven projects take a variety of shapes and forms. I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of some of our favorite projects from over the years. And sometimes you'll see that data is at the forefront of the final product, but other times it influences the approach we take. And so when putting together this talk, we were looking at the fact that these data projects can kind of be grouped into three different categories. We have those that aim to inform, those that provide an opportunity for people to explore data, and those that aim to inspire. And so the first set of projects aim to inform by using multimedia data storytelling to help audiences gain a new or a better understanding of misrepresented or underrepresented topics. Like this project, which uses data from the Center for Human Rights and Policy Studies survey about gender-based violence across 3 low-income local informal settlements in Nakuru County in Kenya. They administered the survey to nearly 2,000 people, and the survey results showed that only 1 in 20 women who are raped report that crime to the police. So after uncovering that insight in the data, the Center for Human Rights and Policy Studies started working to dig deeper in the data to understand why that was the case, and as a result, started working then to advocate for more specially trained female police officers stationed at every gender desk in every local police station. And this is a project we produced in partnership with the Yemen Peace Project, and it sought to inform readers of the human cost of US support for the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen. The data we were working with, so the Yemen Data Project had logged 44,000 airstrikes between March 2015 and October 2018. To put that into perspective, that's an average of 32.8 airstrikes per day across that period. The story package, which we produced using a platform called Shorthand, includes videos, photos, interviews. We took before and after aerial images from the Google Earth satellite, and we also embedded Tableau dashboards of the data into the story. And one of the great things about this story was that at the end, it included a script template that US-based readers could use to call their senators and ask them to support the Senate Joint Resolution number 54, which aimed to force the president to withdraw all US forces involved in the conflict. And that resolution was approved by a vote of 56 to 41 in December 2018. So the next type of project that I'd like to show you are the projects that give people opportunities to explore and to engage with data sets. And that means that they can extract their own insights, find their own stories in some sense, and also then to draw their own conclusions. This project is called Uproar Tools, and it's powered by more than 80,000 rows of data taken from the United Nations. And with that data, we created a set of tools that gives human rights defenders these kind of supercharged insights to help them target their lobbying and advocacy more effectively. The tools help people decide who to approach and also how to communicate effectively with them. It supports sort of teaching around the very specific language that the United Nations speaks, but it presents it in a very user-friendly way and really humanizes the data. And in terms of telling powerful stories with data, making sure that the human aspect of data is at the forefront is one of the kind of key aspects. And so exploratory data projects like Uproar Tools are really about putting the power back in the hands of users. And a project like this contains countless stories that are then waiting to be discovered. And this project, Perceiving Yemen, in addition to helping users explore the data, it also provides a way for researchers and journalists working at the Yemen Polling Center to capture new data for their reports in a far less risky way. So the platform itself presents data collected from more than 5,000 Yemenis about their media consumption habits, the security situation, and their living conditions. But the final project isn't just a website, it's a system of Wi-Fi hubs that can also collect survey response data and transmit it back to the organization's home base. And you'll probably have gathered by now that even though I've tried to categorize our projects neatly into 3 groups, that there's considerable overlap. But I'm going to stick with it anyway, because the groups of 3 seem to be easier to remember. So the last type of project that I'd like to show you are our Inspire projects. And these aim to change government policies or practices, social norms and perceptions. And they usually have a specific call to action or aim to use data to persuade people to take a specific action. This is one of those projects. It's called Hear the Blind Spot. It's a data sonification. That means as well as visualizing data in the form of line charts, we've also created an audio track that presents the data in an audio format. And it was created in partnership with an Ethiopian charity called Together that supports people with visual impairments to access technology and information. The data project is a story narrated by Desta. She's a fictional character, and she tells the story of Ethiopia through her lifetime using the sonified data that is performed on a flute. And the package for this story includes downloadable sheet music and scripts in Amharic, English, and Braille. so that the story can be performed live in schools and at community events. One of the other kind of key factors about data visualization and data storytelling is that often people are really put off by statistics and numbers because they think that it has to be really complicated or complex, or that you need a deep understanding of mathematics to kind of engage with it. And I think that, you know, if that's the case, then what you're presenting is too complicated. From our perspective, using numbers and narratives together should help kind of simplify and make a story more powerful. And that's especially the case with this project, which we created in partnership with Digital Shelter. They're a Somali organization. Without Fear is a campaign that aims to create open, safe, and inclusive online spaces free of harassment. The project was created after Digital Shelter surveyed Somali women, and a third of them said that they spend less time on social media due to the harassment that they've received. In addition to a free downloadable digital security checkup calendar, my favorite part of this campaign is actually an audio-visual poem that was inspired by the data and written by the Somali poet called Zahara Muhammad. In Jordan, 14% of all marriages involve a girl under the age of 18. So for A Bride with a Doll, we worked with Arab women organization to create an interactive, data-led, but offline experience that can be shared between mothers and daughters. The outcome is a series of posters, social media assets, and the kind of feature piece of this is a storybook about a 14-year-old girl who's forced to marry, and the physical, emotional, and economic consequences of that early marriage. The book can be read from front to back or back to front, with one direction of the story telling the story of the girl and the other telling the story of the mother. So even though all of these projects are different in their approach and execution, they all began with a seed of an idea that was planted by data. And they all rely on storytelling in one way or another to make that data come alive. And so to create these projects, we really rely on people like you, those in the field of data, journalism, design, and technology, to collaborate on these projects. At a minimum, each Data4Change team has a designer, a data researcher or data scientist, a web developer, and a journalist or data journalist. So you might be wondering how we fit all of the pieces of a dream data project team together. And we actually have an in-house joke that the typical team for a Data4Change project actually has to be as atypical as possible. And for all of our in-person sprints, we hold open calls, which we promote on our website and our social media pages. And just to give you an idea, around 400 people usually apply for the 20 spots. So it is quite competitive. And it takes a lot of time and consideration then for our review panel to really carefully curate a sprint team for one of our events. So how do we find our dream teams, and what are we looking for in our storytellers? Well, there's some good news is that we've shifted our work online like everyone else during the pandemic, and that means we're taking a slightly different approach at the moment. We've just closed an open call for data associates to join us in part-time paid positions on new data storytelling projects. So a top tip is to keep your eyes on our Twitter feed, as we'll be posting a call for journalists and storytellers very soon. Who will we be looking for? As long as you're a great storyteller and you know how to ask the right questions, then you're the type of journalist we want to apply to participate in a Data4Change team. If you identify as a data journalist, then that's great. Knowing your way around a pivot table or a spreadsheet is always a bonus. If you've got a programming language up your sleeve, then you're well on your way to being the type of multi-skilled superstar that we're looking for. But if not, as long as you're a whiz with words and you can write, edit, and produce great content for a range of audiences and platforms, then you're a really good match. But above all, you need to be able to take really complex information and work it into a simple story that is compelling and easily understood. So as I mentioned at the beginning, because I'm not a journalist, and exclusive for this talk, we gathered together some of the top journalists from our network around the world to share their data journalism top tips. And whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, I hope these tips resonate with you as they should with anyone who's pursuing the stories behind the statistics.
Hi, I'm Christine Zong, Financial Times. Here are my 3 top tips. 1, have an idea of what you're looking for. Coming up with a theory to test before digging around the data is a good way to start. 2, don't lose sight of the story when crunching the numbers. It's not about the complexity of your analysis. It's about the strength of your results and why they matter. 3, work on a passion project involving data. You learn more and quicker when you're working on stuff that you care about.
Tips on working with data. Number 1, give it time. You need time to find the data, scrape it, clean it, analyze it, and then communicate it. There's no way around this one, but it is worth it. Number 2, the data is out there. Coming from the African continent, we are not known for documentation, but you'd be amazed at how much data is out there and you can use. So just know where to search, find the doors to knock on, and keep knocking until you get what you need.
Working with data can be intimidating, but it's a really important and insightful way to see how systems work. So here are my 3 tips. First of all, think at the unit of the person. It can be hard to think about what you might want in a database or what numbers you want to look at, but think about how does someone engage with a system? What information do they fill in when they get a service? What portal do they use? And that can help you build out your questions. Second, question data and be skeptical of data just like you would of a comment from a government agency. A lot of the time, the numbers that are given to you are not always going to be the full story. So ask those hard questions. And third, in both those processes, trial and error is okay. You might not always find what you need in the first database you request, or it might take 10 queries to see the information you're looking for and make sure it's accurate. But I think that's really part of the process. And I think that can be hard when just starting out, but is also a really interesting component of it. Good luck.
I think my main top tip for people who want to work in data journalism is essentially to come up with ideas. You know, you can be the best coder, you know, have the best data journalism skills in the world, but ultimately, if you don't have ideas for building stories, it doesn't really matter. It's just simply a means to an end, but you don't know what the end is. So I think the most important thing when it comes to data journalism is basically being able to look at a data set and having ideas of what to do with that data set, you know, coming up with story ideas, different ways of telling that story, and then being able to think about ways to deliver that story.
Hi, I'm Miriam. If you're a journalist who wants to work with data, my top tip is to learn a programming language like R or Python. It can be a steep learning curve if you're new to programming, but it's totally worth the time invested. You can do so much more with your data than you can in spreadsheets, and much faster. You can work with bigger data sets, you can make almost any kind of chart, and you can also share your code with other people so that they can reproduce it and they can build on it.
Be data informed, not data led. This means that data tells you something, but not everything. It's up to you to find out what's missing and why. Even a reputable source of data can be wrong or incomplete. Your work as a journalist is to be accurate, fair, factual, and to find out the truth, whatever format it has been saved as.
Yeah, what really resonates with me there is Dickens, who said you have to find out what's missing and why, and Emma, who says that the data is out there, you just have to keep knocking until you get what you need. In case you just can't wait to get started, these are some of our favorite and most used tools. Shorthand, a no-code platform that provides a visually compelling and easy-to-use framework for creating multimedia scrolly stories. And we used shorthand for the projects that we shared in the Inform category. Flourish is a super high-powered and very customizable data visualization tool. Raw graphs, we use this for exploring raw data and finding visual patterns and trends. An infogram is great for producing infographics and data visualizations, either for embedding on websites or for sharing on social media with kind of interactive components. And if you're just starting out, we've also got a free open source self-study course called Data Basics, which you can take online. And Michael's just messaged me to say that the security settings in the live chat mean that we can't post links. So what we'll do, if you follow us on Twitter, it's @Data4Change. We'll post a link to our Notion after this talk, and we'll have all of the links that we've mentioned there in case you want to check them out. So that brings me to the end of my talk, and I'll stop sharing my screen now so that we can go over and have some Q&A if there are any questions.
Hi, Bronwen. Yes, we have some questions for you. I will start with Jeremy. Jeremy asks you, what are some challenges you face with data, narrative or digital or visual media?
Oh, that's a big question. There are some of the challenges. Well, I think I can start by saying, like, one of the biggest challenges is, like, even though Dickens was saying, you know, you have to find out what's missing and why, and Emma's saying that the data is out there, you just have to keep knocking until you find it, is that is a big challenge. So you might have a question, you might think that the data should be there, and it might not be, despite how much you look. You might have to create a new data set by scraping some unstructured information online. What we tend to do is that we start with a data set and let that inform the story, rather than starting with a story and trying to find data that kind of gives evidence or weight to the story, which might be a different approach. But because we're usually working with civil society organizations that work on a particular theme, they often either have data or we support them to collect data, and then we use that as a jumping off point. So we find the story in the data rather than finding the data to fit the story.
We have another question from Itedal. Itedal asks, at the time of the great flow of information and its contradiction at the same time, how can the information be revised and become objective and reliable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If I understand it correctly, is it kind of like around maybe how that something kind of goes out of date because data is changing and information is changing? If that's the case, with the example like the Uproar Tools platform that we shared, that platform actually connects to an API of a United Nations website and regularly calls that website for updated data. So that it's there. But other times we always have to add the kind of caveat that this is a snapshot, it's a story, it was a moment in time. I guess just like any other journalistic piece or story, it's telling a story of a particular moment in time, and sometimes that does go out of date very quickly. Yeah.
We have one question more from Sebastian. Sebastian asks, what role do you see your data technology play in the future journalism landscape?
That's also a good question, but as a non-journalist, I think I've struggled to answer that. And also, I'm curious to know what, and it's difficult when we can't have a conversation about it, but what you mean by data technology. If you mean sort of like data storytelling or visual storytelling, I'm hoping that visual storytelling becomes even more of a part of journalism than it is at the moment. I think that there's a sort of power as well in independent journalism, civic journalism, in being able to tell stories. And that's one of the things that we're really striving to do at Data4Change, is to empower civil society organizations with the kind of tools that they need to be able to tell their own stories, even if that is with the support and partnership of journalists and designers, but that they have the power to tell their own stories.
We have one question more. What are the main data sources?
That's a good question. If you follow us on Twitter, when we post the Notion link, we can put a few in there. There's a lot of really, really good open data sources out there. The Data Basics course that we'll share the link to actually has a really great kind of checklist in it for vetting open source data. And it's really important that you kind of go through that process when you use a data source to kind of make sure that it is as sound as possible as a source. But we use a lot of UN data, and there's a bunch of portals like the World Bank that you can get kind of demographic data. But it really does depend on the theme that you're interested in. One of my favorite data sets, there's an organization called ACLED, and they have a really great data set on sort of conflict location and migration data. So we'll share the link with that one as well. There's a lot of stuff to play around with in terms of practicing data visualization and data storytelling if it's something you're interested in getting into.
Thank you so much, Bronwen. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your experience and your knowledge about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It's great to be a part of it.
Labdien, buenos días, bos días.
Hi. Hello.
This is the European Journalism Center.
Since 1992,
we've been helping journalists all over Europe.
Now we ask for your support.
Join the European Journalism Collective.
And with a small donation, you can help us remain independent and sustainable.
So we can continue supporting journalists just like you.
And do even more.
And do even more.
And do even more.